the live button. Okay, it says we're live, so I'm just going to go to Facebook and check, and then I'm going to share it. Actually, I don't need to share it because it's on my page. I'm just going to drop the link here in case people want to join us.
Okay, and I will share it.
Facebook and check, and then I'm going to share it. I don't need to share it.
And I will share it.
Love technology. Okay, so we're just going to start out by introducing everyone. We have our highly esteemed panelists here. Thank you for joining me once again. We're going to start with Ram Krishan. Ram, give a little wave to everyone. He is a lifelong student and teacher of traditions of universal wisdom and the pathless presence of the authentic heart. For more than 13 years, he has traveled the world, studying and immersing himself in different cultures and wisdom traditions to more deeply understand himself and uncover a thread of unity that runs through all of life. He shares in the spirit of unity through his work, which he calls the science of cultural detox and the way of the radiant heart. His journey began straight out of high school when he traveled to Peru, seeking deeper meaning to his life. Finding a healer and guide, he began what became a course of 11 years of training in plant spirit medicine of the Peruvian Amazon. He has extensive experience working with plants as a pathway into deeper self-realization and actualization. He has the experience of being in countless ceremonies, facilitating healing retreats, and working with people from all over the world in a wide variety of different conditions. His path has led him to fully embrace the Kundalini yoga lifestyle as a way of embodying and sustaining an expansive consciousness that serves humanity in these times. And although he has the highest regard and respect for the work with plants, he has not worked with them for many years. And I'll just quickly remind our panelists to mute yourself if you're not muted right now. Kerry, I'd like to introduce Kerry Samadi. She has for more than 20 years, she has had the privilege of guiding people's journeys into the ascension of human consciousness. As a psychic who specializes in higher dimensional communication, her work has taken many forms, from interspecies communication, ranging from interaction with the enlightened species of our own planetary backyard, such as dolphins, elephants, and whales, to higher dimensional beings, both terrestrial and non-terrestrial, to private readings exploring the personal energetic signature of each person's evolutionary path, specifically the path of this lifetime within the framework of a greater soul trajectory aimed at expansion and ascension. Her energy is currently being redirected to teaching and reaching larger numbers as the collective human consciousness has requested support to make rapid and radical moves into higher consciousness, as well as ongoing support once that shift has taken place. And last but not least, we have Daniel. After a profound and intense awakening experience in 1998, Daniel dove deep into his yoga and meditation practice to stabilize his realization in his body and the world. Thank you for doing that, Daniel. He began teaching in 2002 and took over leadership of his neighborhood yoga studio in 2004. He's directed several teacher training programs and taught on the faculty of even more. Once he taught Vedic mythology at an online Wiccan theology seminary in Second Life. Daniel Sitaram Das Shankan has dedicated his life to the cultivation of clarity, resilience, and heart, with the recognition that our true nature is vast and generous, wise. He strives to serve his clients in finding their own innate goodness and boundless strength. He currently offers leadership coaching with a heavy emphasis on mindfulness and somatics, and is based in Marin County. So thank you so much, each of you, for joining today. I really appreciate your presence here. And the focus today really is to offer an understanding of the importance of knowing both sides of plant medicine, what people are calling sacred plant medicine, and that includes psychedelics, mushroom, ayahuasca, marijuana, you know, all the San Pedro, all the different things that are available out there. And to bring each of your own perspectives. And the idea is not to bring judgment to anyone's choice, but to really just provide a foundation of education. And if people are choosing to use, to understand what is important before they go into ceremony, because that's a big piece that's often missing. And here in Sedona, I'm exposed to a lot of invitations to join. I personally have never felt called to plant medicine. I have a very different path, but I have seen the shadow side and what it can do. So first of all, some people say, you know, there is no shadow side to plant medicine. It's the humans that bring the shadow. So I'd like to just quickly go around in the circle and have each of you share your thoughts or opinions about that. Ram, Krishan, can we start with you?
Sure. Yeah, I wholeheartedly agree with that statement that the plants themselves they're an extension of nature, and they're very neutral in what they are. And it's really the amplification of the human psyche and the neuroses and the different aspects that we might have inherited from our culture that get amplified and become what we can call shadow aspects. I don't know how quick of a response, but that's the gist of what I'd like to say.
Perfect, thank you. Kerry, would you like to share your perspective on that?
Yeah, sure. I think had you asked me, Susie, maybe a year or two ago, I probably would have said exactly the same thing that Ram has just said. But after my own experience, and you know what, I'm only sharing my own experience. I cannot speak for anybody else, but my own experience led me to understanding that there really is a very deep shadow side to plant medicine. And it's not in the plant itself. The plant itself is pure. It's where we go when we journey with that plant, which is into the astral realm. And doing a lot of work in the astral realm as a psychic, I have a very firm grasp of what goes on in that place. And it can be icky, and it can be sticky, and it can be beautiful, and it can be loving, just like here, no different. There is a light and a shadow side, but the difference is when you're taking plant medicine, you're very vulnerable, you're very open, you're very exposed. I have to add this though. I'm a huge proponent of plant medicine, just not now. And what I mean by just not now is we're very close to a mass ascension process. And because we're very close to a mass ascension, that puts us teetering in some very dangerous territory, where the light is lighter and the dark is darker. And those who are in the darkness are doing everything in their power to do what they do best, which is to manipulate. And, you know, later on as we go, I'll share my stories, my firsthand stories about that. But that's the gist of my overall opinion.
Thank you, Kerry, for sharing. Daniel, anything that you want to speak to that?
I think that, you know, the idea of shadow material and shadow sides is, you know, probably like a Jungian term, right? Which is something that has been ascribed to human psychological processes. And I don't think that it really has anything to do with the rest of the world per se, the rest of the material world, things like plants or things like fire. You know, we might as well be discussing the shadow side of fire. Fire's not it's not personal, right? It's a natural force, and you can use it to cook your food, and you can use it to burn something, right? You can use it to burn in either a helpful or a harmful way. And while things are very, very energetic, you know, you could also talk about the shadow side of a tiger, right? It's just tigers do what tigers do. And so I don't necessarily see the point in sort of getting into sort of fear-based narratives around just something that's part of the natural world, when it's much more useful for us to look at the shadow sides of ourselves and talk about how we're going to be the best people we can be, and be the most open-hearted and clear-seeing beings so that we can encounter whatever it is we're going to encounter, whatever we're called to be a part of, in a way that creates the most benefit and the least harm. And mute.
Beautifully said, Daniel. So do you think then why the shadow side comes through in some cases when people engage in ceremony is because of our own psychosis, our own neurosis, our own wounding? Who would like to speak to that question?
I can definitely say that it would be a person's own psychoses. I've seen it firsthand. It would be a person's own neuroses that would surface. That's undisputed. But with that, there is also the shadowy aspect of hovering around in that astral realm where we are open right now to some very intense and very deliberate manipulation. For people who have different worldviews, I don't think there's any purpose in, personally, I don't think there's any purpose in debate. I really don't, because I think that our personal worldview is what we hold dear and what is our personal truth at that time. So what I say is not to change anybody else's opinion, only to share my experience. So to answer the question, Susie, yeah, absolutely. It's the person's own shadow. It's the person's own stuff that rises up for them to deal with without a shadow of a doubt. That's the huge benefit of plant medicine. But the very big con at the moment is that it does unnecessarily expose people to some very heavy seated manipulation and distortion that happens in the astral realm.
Okay, and thank you, Kerry, and we might get into that a little bit deeper in a moment. I'd like to give Krishan and Daniel a chance. Daniel, why don't you go ahead?
So, excuse me, sugar's bad for you, right? I don't eat a lot of sugar, but sometimes I eat sugar. Lots of people die in car accidents. I still drive my car. I can't live my life based on an amorphous fear that there are shadowy, manipulative figures trying to twist my mind up in weird ways. I know that there are shadowy forces trying to twist my mind up in weird ways. And it reminds me of something that one of my very first teachers, my father, told me. And what he told me was, you can't cheat an honest man. And I've been sitting with that for 40 years. And through my, study in yoga practice, through like teachings like the Yoga Sutras of Patanjali, he talks about the ethical guidelines. And one of the things he says about the ethical guidelines is that they are universally applicable, is that we're always to be honest and straightforward and forthcoming and follow. I won't give you a whole lesson on the sutras, but you get it. And what I find is that if I'm in a difficult place and I act ethically, I'm basically safe. If I'm in a shadowy realm and if I find myself in some sort of shadowy realm and there's some sort of temptation to act unethically and I take it, yeah, I'm in trouble. And if I'm in a shadowy realm and I'm tempted to act unethically and I don't, then I'm fine. I'm stainless and I'm pure. And so I can't live my life in fear of anything, right? I live my life as a beacon of light, I suppose. And so if we're going into, the shadow comes up because we ask it to, in the psychedelic journey, is like, many of us probably started recreationally and had an unexpected awakening, like some unexpected spiritual revelation. And then there was this call, right? It's very much, Joseph Campbell, hero's journey kind of thing. We have a call to step up. And then we go back into these places for the purpose of purification and the purpose of growing and evolving. And It reminds me of another quote that love brings up anything unlike itself for the purpose of healing. And if there are shadowy forces in the world that are up, they're there because we're here to heal them. Like I do not submit. Like I do not surrender. Like I will continue to show up and be the best person I can be to bring more goodness and love into this world. I will not run and hide. And that's something that has been made clear to me by the psychedelic experiences. Like it's because of that experience that I will be who I'm called to be and mute.
And to clarify, this is not meant to be any type of fear-based conversation. The education that we want to bring to this is to bring more light and understanding to how all of these things work so that people can make a choice, you know, based on what they're feeling guided to in their hearts and in their beings.
I know I got a little fired up there for some reason. I don't know what it was, but I got a little bit
Give Ram Krishan a chance to answer the original question now. Go ahead, Ram Krishan.
So the shadows coming up are really part of the healing process when working with, I have most of my experience working with Amazonian plant medicine and Andean plant medicine. And so in those processes of healing, the shadows coming up are part of the process of integrating these pieces and fragments of ourselves that we've disowned and then projected onto other people and outside situations. But when they start to arise inside of ourselves, that's the part where we get to own them. And then when we own them, then we find an integration and a new level of wholeness. So one level is the shadows are going to come up with that type of work. The other key component is how is the individual approaching that process? Because if we're approaching it in a cultural context of what we've come into in a westernized culture, a lot of times we don't approach the plant medicines as medicine, but instead as something that masks another symptom. So if you go to the Amazon or you're doing work in a very traditional way, very specific plants are for very specific purposes to address causal reasons of why disease manifests. It creates balance on that level, that base level of why the disease will come, disease. So the way that the medicines are being worked with nowadays, sometimes, a lot of times, are just approached in the way of it's just like a pill to mask the symptom of disease. And it doesn't ever come to a point where it would stop. You would just continue to use it and use it and use it and use it. And then in the approach itself, it can create more neuroses and more shadows because we're not actually approaching it in a sacred way where we're integrating and healing and owning those pieces. We're instead maybe fighting with them or trying to even mask those shadows that are coming up. And sometimes like the spiritual identity can just continue to go because we're trying to avoid the shadow instead of own it.
Thank you so much for that, Ram Krishan. It's actually a perfect segue into, instead of seeing the plant medicine as having the shadow, it's actually the process of the ceremony that can sometimes be where the shadow is. And what I mean by that is if the facilitator is not properly seasoned and equipped to lead a ceremony, if the people participating have not had the adequate preparation to go into the ceremony, that's where a lot of the shadow can come up. So what I'd love, if anyone has anything to contribute on this, what I'd love to have you guys share is some of the things to look out for, what to avoid, what to make sure, when you ask the facilitator certain questions, what questions to ask the facilitator to vet them and make sure that they can hold the proper space. So if anyone has anything they want to share about that, go ahead and unmute yourself and share. Okay.
Oh gosh, Susie, I think I just can't do the silences. Maybe it's the woman in me. I because I'm really not a huge proponent on plant medicine, I'm probably not the best person to ask, but I will say this, and it's true. For anything across the board, my answer is, how do you find the right person to work with? Because there are people of profound integrity and wisdom and so forth. And you can ask them 1,000 questions and they can answer those questions perfectly. So I don't think that it's anything on a logical, linear level that's going to give you the answer. I think it's the good old-fashioned, what does my gut feeling tell me in this moment about this person, this medicine, this experience, this whatever it is. I think the only one person you can trust, it cannot be the teacher or whoever's holding the sacred space. It can only be yourself, 100% yourself. And so therefore, your own gut feel. And if you don't know how to get your own gut feel, then you're not ready to do plant medicine or anything. That might sound incredibly harsh, but if we don't do that, then we're going to pass responsibility onto the facilitator. And we're going to say, oh, it's the facilitator's fault.
That's a very interesting
taking responsibility.
That's a very interesting point you bring up, Kerry, because a lot of people are going into plant medicine in a desperate state. They're seeking answers, they're wanting guidance. And so in that state, they may not have the capacity to listen to their gut in that moment. So it's a very interesting point that you bring up. We're not going to spend too much more time on that because I know there's Daniel, go ahead. What do you want to share?
I agree with most of that, Kerry. I think that's fantastic. We're lucky that it's 2018.
Daniel, your video has disappeared and apparently so has your voice. Okay, while Daniel figures that out, I'm going to have Krishan share anything he wants to share.
Sure. So there are three aspects of what really contributes and facilitates like the experience in the process. There's one, the teacher or facilitator, two, the plant medicine, and three, ourselves. So I agree completely that gut feeling really does need to be there with the person. And like in a more sort of analytical way, I can give some practical other signposts. So looking, and first thing, if you can talk to other people who have worked with that person before and really get a sense from those people what their experience is, that's a valuable thing. Another thing, when you're talking with the facilitator themselves, you can ask what their training was, how long their training has been, how much experience do they have facilitating this type of work.
And what answers do we want to hear from that? 5 years, 10 years, 20 years?
I would say 5 years as a minimum. And then if it's 5 years, then you really want to feel with your gut if this person feels like they're a beam of light radiating integrity. And then another thing you could do is you could look at their Facebook page, really. You could see what types of things are they sharing? What are their pictures? What are their activities? You know, look, really investigate and feel the person out. And on today's age, that would be an effective way of investigation as well. Yeah, I've had experiences with different facilitators, and for me, I only worked with a very straight lineage, meaning, well, I worked with very specific teachers who I resonated with. And one ceremony, I went to a different teacher and I didn't necessarily listen to my gut. And I found myself in the middle of a ceremony. I'm like, I do not ever want to do this again. So it's a very, very important thing when you're choosing who you're going to work with, because you can just be so open, and you are so open. And then you're in a situation, and if it's not protected correctly and it's not led correctly, then it's not creating divine order, and it's not filling you with that vibration that's like resonant with the cosmos. It's just creating more of the same stuff that we're actually going there for to get rid of.
Tell me what you mean by protected correctly. What needs to be done in order to protect a ceremony and not allow any energies or entities to come in that are not of the highest good?
Yeah, so there are many different traditions that approach that thing, that very protection, that topic, in different ways. For example, and all of them are valid, depending on what the lineage of the person who's studied is. So one way, for example, is you're smudging the entire space beforehand. you're opening the ceremony in a way that you're honoring and saluting all of the directions and inviting protection, and you're creating a sacred space, and you have a central altar and a central piece that acts as like a vortex to channel the energy. And it's a contained experience in that way. You open it, you close the ceremony, the space itself is very clean, and people are coming around often with smudging to just keep it clean and elevated. All of these things. And then also the training of the individual will be able to allow that individual to sing at different times and do different things at different times when the energy needs it. The energy will need to change and need to shift. But if a person hasn't trained, they really don't know what to do to facilitate that. And again, if they're acting out of like a cultural, out of their ego, essentially, it's like what they think they should be doing. It's not necessarily connected to what is actually needed in the situation. And that's where the training comes in, to know what's needed to maintain balance and continue an uplifting spiral.
And what you're saying, Ram Krishan, is really what, as facilitators, if we're facilitating sessions for people or facilitating retreats or anything, that's exactly what we need to be doing. It applies to that too. So I really appreciate that you brought that in. I'm going to see if Daniel's still with us. Daniel, are you able
to? I'm here. I just lost my camera. So I'm sorry about that. Can you hear me? I'm assuming you can. So what I was saying when I got cut off, and I'm sorry for my technical difficulties, is that we're very, very lucky to live in a world that has a lot of information. And we live in a world that has increasing access to these things and to the collection of best practices. There are things that I teach my clients and my students on how to protect and maintain their own minds. I do think it's important to have a good facilitator and I'm also, I want to get back to the facilitator and ethics, facilitator ethics. But one of the things that I find, and there's actually science to back this up, there's a woman named Catherine McLean who did a study at Johns Hopkins with psilocybin and mindfulness. And she took people who were very new to the experience and she gave them meditation and mindfulness practices and then gave them psilocybin in a controlled setting and guided them back to their mindfulness practices. And one of the things that they found is that these people's personalities changed for the better. They came up with scientific markers for a better personality, things like openness and flexibility and compassion. And these people became, literally scientifically proven, became better people in a lasting way. So, depending on what you're doing, yes, your facilitator is going to be important. But there are things that you can do to prepare yourself and prepare your mind and your body to withstand the intense information and energy that comes at you in a psychedelic experience. And I'm continually concerned when I hear about practitioners who are working with people without any preparation. I think preparation is super important, and asking yourself questions like, is this the right time for me? What is my intention? How do I want to set myself up to deal with difficult situations and things of that nature?
Yeah, that's beautiful. And that's part of the work that I appreciate that you do, Daniel, is preparing people and then having them integrate the experience afterwards, because sometimes, someone goes through a ceremony and they're just left high and dry afterwards. And I'm going to share a few things that have been shared with me for people who didn't necessarily want to appear in this format, but I feel are very important. Someone shared with me how they actually had a PSTD experience after going through ceremony because it brought up so much trauma so quickly, and they weren't necessarily equipped to handle it afterwards. And they, literally had PSTD and had to go through healing for that. plant medicine opens portals. And so we have to know what portals we're opening, where we're traveling, where we're going, who and what's allowed to come in through those portals. All of that is very important to understand, that can happen during a ceremony. This happens frequently here in Sedona. The facilitators don't have the proper experience, and sometimes the ceremonies are kind of spontaneous. I've been invited to a ceremony like 3 days, in advance, with no, I've been told you should have at least 2 weeks beforehand of preparing, with your diet and your mind, emotions, all of that kind of thing. So if you're invited into a ceremony that's going to happen 3 days later or a week later, it may not be the right time to jump in. You need to have a longer preparation time. This is something very interesting that maybe the three of you would like to speak to. The DNA of the plant calls in shepherds, and this person was specifically referring to ayahuasca. And I'm trying to figure out how to say it. The DNA of the ayahuasca calls certain people to be shepherds of it. So you might call it shamans, or people to continue facilitating ceremonies. And my question is, does that ever take someone away from their true soul mission? Like, is that plant powerful enough to pull someone out of their, out of the reason they came to this planet? Does that question make sense to you guys? Okay, and does anyone have anything they want to share to answer that question?
Well, I'm just curious, how much faith do you have in somebody's soul? Like, I have a lot of faith in people's soul to like find their mission. And I sort of feel like in the Bhagavad Gita, it says no effort along this path is wasted. So I think that while I can sometimes I'm lazy and sometimes I indulge in my character defects, I'm lazy, greedy, jealous, what have you. Again, those are just expressions of the things that need to be healed. So, it's not like, I think that if you're on your path, you're not going to get too far off.
Thank you for that answer, Daniel. Thank you. Ram, Krishan, or Kerry, anything you want to say to
that? I'm laughing before I'm speaking, because I know that there are people that are going to go, no, Kerry, don't say that. But, this is the truth of my own experience. And it is, yeah. And the reason why is because we inadvertently open ourselves up to entities and attachments in the plant medicine journey. And, that can make our journey harder, where a lot of people are using plant medicine to heal, and it can heal. The studies done on psilocybin and its healing power of the brain and its ability to rewire our neural pathways is clinical, it's proven. But I'm not talking about that clinical stuff. I'm talking about the astral interference. And with astral interference, yeah, definitely, you can land up coming away with more than you bargained for, and not in the best sense. And again, I don't say that to trigger anybody. And by the way, I must just also clarify something, because I think Daniel commented earlier about, he doesn't live in fear of, I can't remember, Daniel, what you called it, shadowy forces. Neither do I. I don't live in fear of them at all. I just choose not to go somewhere where I know they hang out. That's all.
So you're saying the DNA of the ayahuasca itself may not be pulling someone off their soul mission or off their path, but it's the interference from astral realms that could be pulling someone off their path.
Yeah, and I want to be specific that applies to this time. This time, as we move closer and closer to ascension, that's where I work. I'm in this life and on this journey to support the ascension process. And I understand that the ascension process and this time is unlike any other time. You know, honestly, and I meant it, had you asked me a year ago, I would have been the biggest proponent of plant medicine. Okay, maybe more like a year and a half ago, but still. Times have changed. Things have sped up. The interference we're dealing with is immense. And so it's not about living in fear. It's just about being wise. That's all.
Being aware. Yeah. Thank you for that, Kerry. Ram Krishan, anything you want to share?
Sure. I know personally quite a few people who the medicine itself has guided to, for example, Kundalini yoga path. You know, it's the medicine does have a way of, I want to talk about it later, but the medicine really wants to teach. It wants to show us all how to live. So sometimes a certain practice or a certain discipline is really resonant with what is needed, and the medicine is going to direct that person in that way. So yes, I do agree that it's possible that a person could get lost, but I'm not saying it's because of the plant medicine itself, but it's because of probably the facilitation. Because the medicine, if it's in your path to work with some sort of tradition or meditation or practice, it's likely going to guide you in that direction.
Okay, thank you for that clarification. Thank you. Okay, so a few more things to cultivate awareness about that going into ceremony can be a trap if you're working from an ego space instead of from a space of wanting to heal yourself. And so there can be a fuller ego embodiment going into plant medicine if you're not knowing how to keep your ego integrated and in check. So you want to just be aware of that, understanding and knowing how you're approaching the ceremony and checking in with yourself. You know, am I in an ego space to approach a ceremony, or am I in a place to really look at myself and the shadow that comes up for me as I go into the ceremony? That's important to have an awareness about for yourself. Don't sit with someone in ceremony who doesn't require a medical intake form. They should know your medical history. They should know any potential things to look out for. So you should be filling out some sort of medical intake form before you go into ceremony. Otherwise, the facilitator may not be equipped to take care of you should something happen during the ceremony. We talked about the dietary guidelines very briefly. You should be modifying your diet and your facilitator should be guiding you through that pre-ceremony. Okay, ask for references. Before you go into ceremony, ask for references about for the facilitator. Okay, this was an interesting one that I didn't know about, that the songs played during ceremony, and this is again specifically referring to ayahuasca ceremonies, they should not be recorded. They should be sung live because there is a technology for protection within the songs. And this was shared with me by someone who frequently participates in ceremony. And then go in with a clear intention. If you're just going in, see what happens, that's not really how the purpose of the ceremony or how ceremony works. So I'm just curious on your thoughts about, what I've seen with people who do a lot of ceremony is sometimes they're very scattered. One person shared with me how they went down to South America, they did a lot of ceremony and they came back and their shaman here said, wow, you have a lot of holes in your aura. You really need to heal that and close those up. Why is that happening? And is there a certain pacing that is wise to adhere to? You can't just keep doing ceremony after ceremony. In my opinion, that's my judgment, my perception. Ram Krishan, you have something to say about that? And sorry, Daniel, if you're raising your hand, I can't see you, but I'll give you a chance in a bit. Ram Krishan, go ahead.
Sure. Yeah, this is another aspect that I consider a shadow aspect of the medicine. And I feel that it's a cultural outgrowth, that the medicine, when a person goes to work with the medicine, again, it's their How are they approaching it? What is their orientation? And a lot of times in South America, the healers there don't have an adequate way of helping to direct the psyche of the westernized person to approach the medicine in a reverential way and really approach it from a way that you're not looking for healing outside yourself. You're really going deeper into yourself to own all the parts of yourself that have become fragmented, and just it's a process that maybe a Western person doesn't understand. Yes, they will continue to feel better if they work with the medicine, but they're not necessarily coming in to own the wholeness of who they are, that they are the shadow, that they are the light, that and then the biggest piece is that this work can be another form of distraction and escape from the karma of why we've incarnated. And that karma is not something bad, but it's our opportunity to serve the world, transform it into our dharma, our life path. It's whatever that density is that sometimes is very painful, that it's our opportunity to own that, and then to apply ourselves to it and transform it and bring our energy into service of this world, not our higher dimensions, but this world, meaning go and feed somebody, meaning go and help paint a fence, whatever it's going to be, to just channel that energy into this world. And that's why I feel that the aura becomes all fragmented, is because a person is avoiding instead of really owning and living into and expanding.
That is really important. Thank you for bringing that into the conversation. So that's another thing to cultivate awareness around if you're considering going into ceremony. Again, why am I doing this? Is it for a distraction, or is it because I'm truly ready to see parts of myself that the ceremony can help facilitate? So Daniel, is there, and Kerry will get to you. Daniel, is there anything you want to say about this?
Sure. Fragmentation, well, you know, it's obviously a medicine that sort of is ungrounding by nature, right? There's a certain level of, like, you know, ether building, right? If you're looking at things, you know, elementally, you know, whereas, you know, something like potatoes might be more grounding. So that's sort of built in, while at the same time, what was I going to say? Excuse me for a moment. Oh, I would like to say I'm a few and far between kind of guy. Like I really, I find for me that I can integrate a single experience for a long time. I pick up a lot of material in the very few and far between sessions that I do at this stage in my life. And I can work with those and try to bring them into my life and my community in a way that is helpful and healing for months. I don't find that it is necessary for me to continually bombard myself with new information when I haven't taken the chance to really, you know, honor the messages for a long time. And then one of the things that we talk a lot about is this concept of the afterglow. So a lot of times when people come out of a session of whatever medicine, they will feel very connected, and they'll have this feeling of oneness, and they'll feel like everything is possible. And sometimes we run into people who have decided that they're enlightened, and that's very annoying for everybody who cares about them. And then a week later, it drops away a little bit, and they're a little bit less enlightened, and they're a little bit less sure and confident and at one. And then a couple of weeks after that, it shifts again. And a couple of weeks, it shifts after that. It shifts a little more. And the question is like, how do we ride this wave of kind of being in, you know, the light of God for a minute, and then being sort of cast out of the garden? And how do we kind of navigate that experience? One other thing, when we talk about, you know, holes in the aura, I don't claim to be an expert in other people's auras. I have some sense of what's happening in my own. Other people's is a mystery to me. and the shadow side of practitioners is that it's one thing to have a practitioner that's sort of unskilled or clumsy. You know, a big part of the shadow side of plant medicine is that there are sorcerers out there that are creating actual harm. And there are stories, if you go, and I can share a link, there's a story in Symposia magazine that was just published about a woman named Lily K. Ross, who went down to the Amazon as part of her master's in divinity from Harvard, and ended up getting repeatedly raped and abused by her shaman, who was mixing other plants into her ayahuasca and was giving her things like scopolamine. And she barely escaped with her life, and then came back to America and was told by her advisors and other people in the psychedelic community that she should keep quiet because they didn't want to harm ayahuasca's reputation. And so there's a lot of these kind of guidelines for people who are seeking ceremony about how to protect themselves and how to stay safe. There's not a lot of guidelines telling practitioners, don't rape your clients. And I think that that's really important. And I hope that if any practitioner, again, I'm a little fired up, if there are any men, you know, who are statistically more likely to rape and abuse people, like if there's any men in the psychedelic community who are hearing me, I'm sorry to have to tell you this, don't rape your friends, you know, don't rape your clients, don't promote yourself as something more than you are. Maybe you're a shaman, maybe you're not a shaman. Maybe you're just someone who's like a little bit more aware than other people, you know? It's like we could all get off our high horses a little bit, and we could all be a little bit more humble, and we could all be a little bit more kind. You know, people are coming to us for care. People are coming to us because they're wounded. Be nice to them. All right, end rant. At the end of that rant.
Oh, thank you for that, Daniel. I think that's really important that unfortunately we have to say that out loud. It's unfortunate, but that is, I think, an appropriate place for righteous anger. So thank you for saying that, Daniel. Kerry, I know that you have to probably leave us soon. So I want to give you a chance. Can you stay with us for like 20 more minutes? Is it? Yeah. Okay. All right. Because I do want to talk about CBD and marijuana. I want to bring those into the conversation. But I would love for you to share anything that you want to share about what we've been discussing.
Cool. Thank you, Susie. You know, Daniel, you said, you know, dealing with the auric field, it's not your domain, not your strong point. And that's exactly my background. That's exactly where I come from. I don't know many things, but I do know energy, and I do know an auric field. And what first tipped me off about the shadow side to plant medicine was a lot of my clients, obviously in the work that I do, a lot of them are undergoing ceremonies and telling me about amazing experiences that they're having. I, of course, have undergone my own ceremony, so I can really relate. But something that I noticed becoming more and more prolific, even just people who are going in for one plant ceremony, is they're coming out of it with an auric field that is fractured and wounded. And that sent neon lights in the sky going off for me, and I started wondering why. Maybe it's the practitioner, because, you know, God knows we've got practitioners who are and can be absolutely unscrupulous. So that was my first question, is can it be the practitioner? Can it be the medicine? And of course, as I've shared with you, my answer that I came to was that it's the interference from the astral realm that people are exposing themselves to, because that's exactly what the astral does, is they siphon our energy. They drink off of our energy. They feed off of our energy. We become their meal. And so, of course, they're going to attach to us. And hence, people come away with it. Sometimes, please, I'm not saying all the time, but people can come away from a plant ceremony with some serious energetic damage to their electromagnetic circuitry, their chakric system, to their overall aura. There can be some very, very negative side effects that can unfortunately take place in one ceremony. I had a lady undergo a mushroom ceremony on a very, very low dose, and she came out of it absolutely riddled with entities. So why does that happen? I think that it's part and parcel of where we're going, as into the astral, in order to have these ceremonies. You know, there's something that I want to say here as well, and that is the notion that you can't cheat an honest man. Something that Daniel said earlier. You know, I've thought about that because I like to think about things. I like not to jump to conclusions, and I like to just internalize for a moment and feel, where am I on this? Because it sounds very beautiful. You can't cheat an honest man. It makes me want to run in a plant ceremony and go, yay, I'm honest. I'm going to be okay, you know. But for me personally, that would be naive. And I think you can cheat an honest man. I've been cheated. Haven't you? The people listening? Daniel, haven't you ever been cheated? I have. Does that mean because I've been cheated that I'm not honest? No. I think we are all living in a society on a planet that is heavily, heavily manipulated. If we think that we're living free, we're deluded. We're living on a planet where we have had the wool pulled over our eyes. And it is time to wake up. And part of that awakening is realizing that not everything is pretty. Not fear. No, don't have to go into fear about it. But once again, do you just really, really have to be aware? So I say that, just summing up, that, you know, that the answer to that question, why do some people come away with it with holes in the auric field and negative side effects like that? Well, because honest people can be cheated.
And I'm not quite sure that that's what he meant by that, but thank you for sharing that, Kerry.
I'd love to know, Susie, and Daniel, please tell me, because I'd really love to know, because
yeah, just a brief moment, Daniel, to share if you have anything to what Kerry just said, and then we're going to move on to the next topic.
Do I have a rebuttal? I don't know if I have much of a rebuttal. I have found for myself when I'm in, and you know, the astral plane, it says, as I have a problem with the throwing around of abstract concepts like the astral plane. You know, that is, it seems like very specialized and proprietary kind of voodoo language that doesn't seem particularly useful to the common person. It seems a little ooga booga to me, right? I work in the realms of, you know, how do we work with our minds? How do we work with, you know, our internal energy system in order to be the people we want to be and to see things clearly and to have the greatest amount of heart. And what I find is that when I go into these spaces, that I get to see where I have been dishonest. And I get to own the parts of my mind that have not been in alignment with my highest good and my highest self. And so I enter into these places and, you know, I do the things that, you know, I like to do to sort of ground and center and protect myself. And then I sit there, and what arises, you know, the demons, you know, forget entities, the demons that show up, I have to come to terms with that these are actually either emanations of my own mind or things that I've made agreements with. And the best thing that I can do is to show them love and show them love and show them love, because ultimately they are a part of myself. And what I find when I'm really in the highest stages of a psychedelic experience is that me as an entity is an illusion. Like, I'm not even a real person. So, you know, like the Daniel Sitaram Das Shankin is a fiction. And so how can a fictional character be possessed by other fictional characters? There's not even any logic to it. And the only logical response is to send more love to myself, because I'm not honest. It's preposterous to claim that I'm honest. I'm so flawed in so many ways. And that's what I have to face. And to kind of personify that as some sort of like external astral sucking creature is such an abdication of responsibility that I don't even know what to do with it. And mute.
Thank you. I just want to take a moment to thank each of you for sharing your authentic expressions and for being able to do that in a space where we all love and respect each other. I appreciate each of you for doing that. I think this is a good time to mention that we are all wired very differently. And so some people have very real experiences with entities, demons, energies, whatever you want to call it, possession, whatever you want to name it. And those experiences are very real. And so I want to validate that for those of you who have had those experiences or are going through something like that. I understand how real it is. And I just want to make sure that you know that there are those of us who have had those experiences as well and know how real that is. As a human being on this planet, I do identify with this person called Susie Byler. And this, Daniel, this might be in a little bit in response to you. I don't believe I'm a fictional character. I'm here as a human on planet Earth, and I'm owning my full essence and full embodiment of that experience. And so I just wanted to offer that perspective as well, because it's just a little bit different than what Daniel said. And I understand what Daniel is saying, and I feel that as well. But I'm want to also offer the other end of that spectrum. Okay, so I want to bring CBD into the conversation because right now it's kind of a trend, and people have found great benefit from it. People have found great healing from it. And I want to just check in with each of you to see if you have seen any shadow side of CBD. Now, CBD is not, I'm not talking about anything with THC or anything that, you know, will give you a high, just the pure medicinal part of the plant. I'm just curious if any of you have thoughts on that. Does anyone want to share?
I could. And I would also like to say that I'm aware that I both exist and don't exist at the same time. I just got back from something called MJ BizCon, which is a 25,000 person marijuana business conference in Las Vegas. It was terrible. It was absolutely horrible. And if I ever tell you I want to go to that again, just remind me that I hated it. The shadow side of CBD that I see is greed. You know, I was hanging around with people who are doing things like vertical integration and just these big corporate endeavors and bringing their businesses public. And there are people who have no connection with the plant at all, other than they see that there is an opportunity for them to make huge amounts of money. And they're doing it. And they're writing policy in a way that doesn't benefit people. They're writing policy in a way that doesn't benefit the earth. Things like marijuana packaging, cannabis packaging, is the new water bottle. It is so excessive and harmful to the planet. And so CBD, I've mostly seen it help people, you know, like, you know, grandmas with like achy joints and stuff. You know, I don't know anything about I can't say anything medical about it, but what I see is that there are just a lot of players who don't care anything about the earth or the plant, and they're using it as a vehicle to fuel their own greed and self-aggrandizement.
Thank you, Daniel, for sharing that. Ram, Krishan, or Kerry, do either of you have anything to say about CBD? No, Kerry? Ram, Krishan?
I just see I see that this again, that perhaps it's not being used as a medicine to treat something, but maybe, I don't know. Actually, I can't say very much. But what I would like to see, rather than many, many, many more products to come to take care of dis-ease that we're facing as a culture, it's to reframe the way that our culture works so that it's more oriented towards health for everybody and our planet and all organisms and all of life. And in that way, we'll experience a lot more natural bliss as our way of life. And then we don't need all the products.
Oh, so much yes to that, Ram Krishan. That is exactly. And look, when I'm going to say something, and this is not in any way to say those of you who are using CBD should stop. But what I want to say is there are ways to experience joy. There are ways to raise your frequency without using the tool. And look, the thing I'm wearing on my head right now is a tool. So I'm the first one to, you know, call myself out. But it's a practice, and people are using CBD to feel better from their anxiety, to feel better from their fears, to feel better emotionally, and to help stabilize them. And that can be a helpful tool right now because there's a tremendous amount of chaos unfolding on the planet. There's a tremendous amount of shadow coming to the surface on the planet right now. And so, like, anything we can use to help us stay at a higher frequency, okay. And there are other ways that you can center yourself, your breath, going into nature, eating pure food, drinking pure water, where the tool is no longer required, but it does take a tremendous amount of inner work. And so if you're at the beginning stages of your awakening, if you're at the beginning stages of doing your inner work, tools can really be helpful. And so I will validate and acknowledge that. And then to say, don't become dependent on the tool, don't get addicted to the tool, because eventually you're going to need to grow into your mastery and release the tools. Kerry, I know you have some things to say about that. So I'd like to give you the floor right now to share how we can move forward without the tools. Actually, sorry, can we talk about marijuana first? And then, do you have time, Kerry? Are you, okay. Okay, you're good, okay. And there's so much we could say about this, so I'm gonna try to keep this discussion relatively short. Ram Krishan, you and I had spoken about marijuana. And so I'd like you to share your perspective. You mentioned that cleaning up addiction is very heavy and it's different than cleaning up some other energies. So I'd like you to share your perspective on that if you would, if you're willing.
Sure. I don't have personal experience other than in high school working with marijuana myself. However, I do have a lot of experience working with people who have come to different healing centers that I've been at to heal addiction, to come out of addiction to marijuana. And specifically in ceremonies when there are these people who have smoked marijuana for long periods of time, the entire ceremony is coated with, it feels like this sticky, heavy, lethargic, you just want to keep like falling asleep over and over again, but it's this energy that's very dense and heavy. So working with that energy in ceremony, I only can understand that within the individual psyche, they're probably experiencing that all the time. And it's a dulling, like a coating almost, and it's sticky, it's tiring, it's heavy. So, and then it's just as any other addiction. People who coming out of that, they experience a lot of anxiety. They experience sometimes a lot of anger can come out of when you're not smoking it anymore and you have been chronically. So I can understand that it is more of a, it's an addictive energy. People have talked to me about it. People who have worked with the plants and come out of addiction have said that it's like a seducing energy. It offers you an exhilaration, a sense of knowledge and power, but when you stop smoking it, that goes away. And when you smoke it, you feel, or when you work with it, you feel that energy, but then when you don't, it goes away. So it creates this cycle of dependency to continue to experience that sort of state.
Yeah, thank you, Ram Krishan, for sharing that. The reason why I investigated this whole thing to begin with, because as I've shared, I haven't experienced any ceremony. I've never smoked marijuana, but I had an experience with marijuana through somebody else with whom I was connected. And after a certain interaction with this person, I felt this like heavy black cloud kind of around me, and like felt like there was something that was trying to like suck my energy and connect with me and pull my energy. And I was like, what is this? Because I hadn't done anything, I was just living my normal life. And when I asked what it was the marijuana trying to form a connection with me so that it could siphon my energy. I never even smoked it. It was just, I was like, wow, this is powerful stuff. I am not messing around with this. Now, I'm not sure if it's the strain of marijuana that was used or if it was organic or not. If any of that makes any difference, I don't know. But the experience I had was enough for me to say, whoa, I need to look into this because this is powerful and people don't realize that it's siphoning their energy. And so that's the awareness that I want to bring through the marijuana conversation, is that it can siphon your energy. And so be very aware what your essence is and what's not your essence. Because there is, specifically with that plant, for some reason, what I was told was that it will give you something, just like Ram Krishan said, it will give you something, but it wants something in return. And to be very aware about what is it taking from you in return when you use it? What is it that it's getting in return from you? How much of your essence is it taking? Okay, Kerry or Daniel, do either of you want to speak to the marijuana conversation?
No, I'm good, Susie. I think it's covered. I think I've got nothing more to say on that one.
Daniel, how about you?
Sure. I think that marijuana addiction's real. I look at the way a shaman uses tobacco ceremonially, and it has powerful and healing effects. And then I look at how millions of Americans and people around the world use tobacco and how it's killing them. And it seems that, this is not different from the way that cannabis can be used and is being used. I find that I myself, I haven't smoked cannabis in years. I don't make good decisions around it. I have addictive tendencies. I haven't, I don't drink alcohol, and I don't smoke cannabis, and I'm not the person that I want to be when I do. And I think that those two medicines, alcohol and cannabis, have a lot of people enthralled. And that when I do work with people, and it is interesting because I see people who have psychedelic journeys and they're like, oh, I'm a drug addict. and helping them to sort of unravel that stuff so that they can live their lives is really, it's meaningful. It's an honor for me to do. And then, it's interesting to watch. We were talking about that afterglow, is that people will come out of a psychedelic journey and will be clean for 6 months. And then it's like they're at a party and they smoke a joint again, and then they're off to the races. And then they have to go back to ceremony to kind of clear out the pattern. And it's a really interesting dance. But I think it's a real dance.
Thank you, Daniel. I, again, just want to thank each of you for sharing your perspectives and opinions, and for doing it in a way where we can all appreciate each other as we share. And I wanted to check Facebook to see if there were questions or comments, but because of the time, I'm going to go to Facebook afterwards and look at questions and comments. And I invite each of the panelists to do that as well. We're going to end with Kerry sharing some ways to connect to the divine, to connect with source without the use of ceremony or psychedelics or cannabis, etc. So Kerry, the floor is yours, please.
Thanks so much. Thank you, Susie. You know, I do a lot of meditation. I teach people meditation. And I just want to clarify that word meditation, because I think when people hear meditation, they go, oh gosh, you know, I can't do it. That's that place I've got to go to where I'm supposed to quieten my busy, frenetic mind, and I can't get it right, so I don't go there. I think that's what a lot of people think when you say meditation, you know. So when I say meditation, I'm not talking about that. I'm not talking about that torturous, arduous task of somehow magically getting all of your thoughts to disappear, because, by the way, that's the end result of meditation, not the prerequisite, but never mind. So when I talk meditation, I'm really talking about a soul journey. That's what I do. That's really connect to people's hearts. And when I lead them on soul journeys, they experience, Susie, the most amazing, breathtaking revelations, connections to themselves, to source, to the universe. I'm like the broken record. Why? Why is it now that we can experience these amazing sacred unions with source, with self, that we couldn't do 6 months ago or even a year or two ago? The level of connection right now is off the charts. It's nothing we've experienced before, because we're in an ascension cycle and we're at a pivotal point and we are so close. We're at what many would consider to be the finishing line or just before it. So as a result, it takes very, very little to move ourselves into sacredness and divine sacredness that we couldn't even imagine. I'm talking rapturous experiences, even for people who've never meditated before. I get a lot of them, Susie. I don't know if you do too, but I get a lot of people come to me and they say, Kerry, I've never meditated before. I don't know what to expect. I don't know what to do. And I'm just showing up and, you know, hoping for the best. And even those people that couldn't spell aura a week before, you know, they're having these experiences. So do we need plant medicine? In my personal experience and opinion, no, we don't. Do we need the connection? Yes, we do. But when it comes in the purest way, and, you know, when we can go into our higher dimensional states of being. So for those who might think that that's ooga booga, higher dimensional states of being are those places where you are at one with life, with the universe, with love, and with all that is. You could also call it a place of transcendence. So easy ways to get there, practical ways to get there: breathing. You're going to roll your eyes. A lot of you are going to roll your eyes. You're going to go, come on, give me something real. What does she mean, breathing? No, really, breathing. Close your eyes and just feel the flow of your own breath coursing through your body. And if you did that for 2 minutes, if you just got still for 2 minutes, and you felt the flow of your breath. See, this is what's magical. It's nobody else's breath. It's your direct connection with the universe. How profound is that? How astounding is it that the thing we've been doing since birth, breathing, the thing that keeps us alive, defines our body's ability to be here in this physical world, we're so unconscious of. So right now in this moment, as you breathe, you're making the unconscious conscious. You're making the unknown known. There's no harm here. There's no risk here. There is you and your breath, and you're in charge, and you're in control, and all you're doing is you're learning right now to become the silent observer. to your own breath, even the neutral observer to your own breath. See, a process like that, if you did that for 2 minutes, just 2 minutes, it would alter your entire field of energy. So that's one tool that I offer you, is learn to connect with your breathing. People say, I don't know how to connect with myself. Well, connect with your breathing. We're talking about plant medicines, and we're talking about people who've had previous addictions. I personally think it's crazy for an addicted person to go into plant medicine, because I feel like they're going to swap one for the other. And I think we've all seen that happen before. So if you could do just a little bit of healing, if you're going to do plant medicine, go for it. But if you could do just a little bit of healing and connecting to self beforehand, you'd be doing yourself a big favor. So breathing is one, guided meditation is another. Seek people out who aren't going to do it for you, but are going to teach you how to connect to your own inner divine. Those are the ones you want to work with. Hope that helps, Susie.
Thank you so much, Kerry. We're going to end with this. I feel that perhaps either consciously or subconsciously, people who are seeking out cannabis or plant medicine ceremony are really looking for themselves. They really do want to connect with their own soul, their own essence. And so just now in this moment, I invite you to close your eyes with me and ask yourself, how does it feel to be with my essence? How does it feel to be with my essence? And take a breath and tune into your body and tune into your energy field. How does it feel to be with my essence? And it's such a simple, powerful tool that you can use with your breath to start to feel more of you. And then, like Kerry said, maybe the ceremony won't even be necessary, because you've created a shortcut for yourself, really, to connect with yourself. We don't need to do anything fancy to connect with our essence, to connect with our soul. We really don't. It's free. All you need to do is set aside the time and commit to yourself. Invest in yourself with time. When you wake up in the morning, before you eat lunch, when you go to bed, when you're driving your car to work, breathe. Ask yourself, how does it feel to be with my essence? And the more you ask yourself that question, the more of your essence you will feel. I promise you, it works. Much love to you all. Thank you to the panelists for joining me today. Appreciate your perspectives and your presence here with me. Thank you for those of us who joined in the audience and for being part of the community. And I promise I will look at your comments later. Appreciate you all for being with us today. Much love, everyone. Mwah.